Retail/service workers of Reddit, what's the best instant karma you've seen happen to a rude customer? As a teenager I was working part-time at a convenience store. I was being trained by the late-night cashier. This dude comes in and grabs a bunch of cans of vegetables and such, and comes to the counter and stacks the cans in a very specific way, like a weird kind of pyramid on the counter. As the experienced cashier, my trainer takes each can off the pyramid and rings it up. She reaches the end of the stack and we realize that the weirdo has his cock out and has it laying on the counter behind the cans. Without saying a word, the trainer grabs one of the big heavy metal cans of beans and slams it down as hard as she can on the guy's dick. He screamed an incredible scream of searing pain, grabbed his cock, and ran out of the store. She to me, calmly, "You get all kinds on the late shift." Standing at the counter of the pizza place I work at, lady storms in and slams a pizza down on the counter. "This isn't the fucking pizza I ordered, what the hell are you going to do about?" she asked. I look at the pizza then at my buddy Nick and turn back to her and say, "Nothing." She then goes on a long rant telling how we are going to be fired, how stupid and incompetent we were. She actually told me I must be retarded, then asked why the hell we weren't going to do anything. I said because that pizza came from the pizza shop across the street. I think she actually managed to shrink in size and slink out looking so pathetic and beaten I almost felt bad for laughing till tears dripped down my face as she slunk off. Worked at Best Buy 10 or so years ago. This happened on Black Friday. Most of the customers were in bad moods since they'd been waiting hours to come in and stand in more lines. But this one lady was a raging bitch. After yelling at everyone in my department about how she needed the laptop that was on sale despite it being sold out, she proceeds to tell us she'll have the store closed down because she works with the city and knows the fire marshal and we have too many people in the store. So she calls him, we tell her to leave, and nothing happens to the store. However, we called them as well to report what she'd said, and she got fired from her job for abuse of power. Wow, for them to do that you can tell they probably hated her already and were looking for an excuse. Working the window at McDonald's late night. Guy orders whatever and pulls up to the window. I'm cooking and handling the window, so I wasn't there when the customer pulled up. When I walked up to the window, I didn't see the fucker with trash in his lap. I open the window to take his card/cash and he throws a bag of trash at me. I take a step back, bothered that I just got trash thrown at me, and I watch his car speed off. I'm pissed, but there's nothing I can do. A couple seconds later I hear a small bang of metal on metal. I walk to the lobby and look out the windows. The douchebag slammed into a police cruiser who was about to loop around and use the drive-through himself. Of course I also went to tell the officer what just happened inside. I work at an auto parts store. This one guy stole some $60 headlights and literally sprinted out the door. We went to look outside to try and get his license plate, just in time to see him speed off, hit a curb, and blow out his tire. Called the cops and the dumbass got arrested and had to have his car towed. More than a few decades ago I worked at Denny's. I had two male customers that decided to dine and dash. Got their license plate number and reported it to the cops and jokingly mentioned that they didn't even tip. Later that night they got pulled over for DUI. Cops recognized license plate number from the report, brought them both back to the restaurant and forced them to pay the bill. After he was done paying, the cop just stood there and looked at them and said, "Well?" The guy sheepishly handed me my tip. Guy comes in and is being a complete asshole. Not wanting to show ID to buy beer even though he looked 20 at the oldest, constantly yelling and swearing. He also had parked in the handicap spot despite not having handicap tags or plates on his car. One of my regular customers, who is a sheriff's deputy, was also in the store. Saw how the guy was acting. Saw where he was parked. Went out, got his ticket book, and wrote the guy a ticket. Guy realized he wasn't getting his beer, went outside, to find he was getting ticketed. I could not stop laughing. I worked at a restaurant that was very popular for brunch, and Mother's Day was probably our busiest day of the year. I had a customer call the evening before and asked for a table for 6, and he was incredibly rude when I informed him that this would simply be an impossibility. He kept getting more and more worked up, asking me to speak to my manager. At first I didn't want to pass the phone over. My manager wasn't the nicest guy and we were in the middle of a busy dinner shift, but my manager came up behind me and demanded to know why I had been on the phone for so long. I was like, fuck it, this customer isn't going to listen to me anyways, and gave the phone to Mac. Mac asked how he could help, listened for about 15 seconds before telling this dude something like, "So you're tying up my hostess in the middle of dinner even though she's already told you nicely that we can't fit you and your goddamn family in the night before our busiest day of the year? Fuck your buddy." And hung up the phone, confused on why he told him to fuck his buddy. Working drive-through at a Tim Hortons, and some asshole in a massive black truck parked too far away from the window and expected me to lean super far out to give him his change. He was real impatient and just really rude. I just shook my head, and so he gets all pissed off and finally gets out of the truck and the door shut behind him. It was locked and he sat there for like 15 minutes and we had to call a tow truck. Sure, it pissed off everyone behind him, but at least they were all pissed off at him and not us. He acted like it was the biggest embarrassment of his life. Warehouse worker here. Customers have to show a card to shop, and even though we're not technically a grocery store, we don't allow pets. One dude tried to power walk past the employee at the entrance door holding a big pit bull puppy on a leash. We stopped him and told him he couldn't bring his dog inside and he lost IT. He's our best customer and he's here 5 times a week and he owns stock, blah. Whatever. He demanded to know why we don't allow dogs. We explained how it's a food safety issue, especially with an untrained puppy. At this point our manager came over and just waved him through. BC no backbone / customers always right. Well, not even 5 minutes later this dog squats in the middle of the main aisle and pees, followed by poop. The man turned so red and dragged the dog towards the exit, abandoning his groceries. We stopped him and asked him nicely to please clean up after his up. That's the reason we don't allow them, sir. I work at hotel's front desk. One day we had an Armenian guest who was claiming the room was not up to his standards and decided to make a big deal about it the next morning. He was so rude to the point of almost making a co-worker cry of desperation because she refused to compensate the night, as his arguments seemed really fake and invalid. Once he saw he was not going to get nothing back, he threw his receipt on the floor and powered walked his way out into a very clean glass door that was recently cleaned. His sunglasses broke, causing him a small cut on the upper part of his nose. My co-worker and I couldn't stop laughing the second he walked out, even more mad. I was a cashier at a grocery store. This guy with a full cart bitched and bullied employees until he was allowed to use my express checkout because he didn't want to wait in the regular lines, and my line only had 2 people in it. As soon as my floor manager allowed him and he had his cart unloaded, a tiny old lady with a walker who could barely stand got in line behind him. Everyone gave him dirty looks. He realized he fucked up and tried to make a joke about it. Dead silence. I hope his saved time was worth being an asshole. Lady lays into me for the amount of the bill, called me every bad word in the English language. Says we overbilled her, she requested I go through her order. Come to find out we underbilled her by a $1,000 due to a misplaced zero. The silence on the other line was so beautiful. Worked at Best Buy for longer than I'd like to admit. One week we had an advertised clearance sale on a discontinued item. Guy comes in already irritated because his GPS took him to the wrong place. Totally my fault, right? He wants to buy the clearance item but we're out of stock, and since it's discontinued I can't order him a new one. As was company policy at the time, I offered to sell him the display unit at an even greater discount. He immediately flips out and starts screaming and cursing at me about bait and switch, threatening to call the cops because he thinks it's illegal and getting in my face like he's going to hit me. This guy is half my size and dressed like Woody Allen in Annie Hall, the textbook definition of physically non-threatening. So I laughed at him and told him to go ahead and call the cops. The police hear his insane tone and agitated demeanor and immediately send an officer to remove him from the store. TL, doctor, customer gets so mad and crazy that he calls the police on himself. Was working at a restaurant and there was this family who were extremely trashy and didn't look like they had a lot of money despite ordering a bunch of expensive steaks and drinking a bunch of drinks. They were rude the whole time, treating me like I was their butler or slave. Then asked for a manager to tell the manager that their steaks tasted rotten after they finished, and their drinks didn't taste like they had any alcohol in them. Again, finished. Just trying to get free food. My manager noticed the way they were treating me and knew they were full of shit and refused to comp their meal like they were demanding. They began yelling and cussing at him and me and ended up trying to leave without paying. Only to have their car not start in the parking lot, and my manager called the police and one of them got arrested for disorderly conduct and drug possession and the rest ended up walking after having their car towed. Worked at a gas station some odd years ago and the week before it had been snowing a lot, so the gas tankers got delayed due to safety reasons. A customer came in a pretty new Mercedes-Benz, something like SLS 400 or something, and wanted the premium gas. I explained to him that the takers are delayed and we currently don't have any premium gasoline and that he could try the next station down the block. He started swearing at me personally like I has control over the gas delivery. He sped off, tires screeching, only to have his rear tire hit the curb. His rim got fucked up really bad and couldn't drive it. I laughed at him. I was waiting at a hotel reception while a young staff member checked me in. A really obnoxious woman flounced over, interrupted what the girl was doing and proceeded to bitch about the standard of the kettle in her room. She ranted on and on about only having a normal kettle until I told her to wise up and get in bloody line behind me. She shouted that she had been traveling all day and that the room was not a suitable standard. I pointed out it was a fucking airport hotel, we'd all been traveling all day, and that she should just get lost. By now the girl at the desk was blood red and tearful. The woman banged her fist on the desk, demanded to see a manager, and then had a fit of coughing. She promptly shat herself all through her beige trousers. She didn't hang around after that. When a rude customer's card would be declined, it would always bring a real smile to my face. Worked on USMC base in the store that sold the uniforms. We had like 2 people walk in that morning. I was slacking off, trying to take a nap inside a clothes rack. A grunt walked into my section to browse camo fatigue covers, hats. He didn't know I was there, so I just kept quiet. Watched him swap out his nasty old cover with a new one and walk out. Brought it up to my boss, and that's when I noticed the guy's name and number were written inside, which were relayed to the MPs. Late to the party, but whatever. Back when I worked at a blockbuster, we'd occasionally deal with thieves. The standard was just to let them go, not endanger employees or customers. One time this guy grabs some stuff and bolts. My manager runs after and points him out to 2 cops that had parked in our parking lot. They give chase. This guy dodges and weaves through people and traffic. He successfully crosses the street with cops on foot. Desperate to lose them, he jumps down some stairs to gain a lead but breaks both legs. When I was a cashier at Borders, I had this one customer that had either put something on reserve or had special ordered. I remember them getting really rude because I couldn't find it and asked them multiple times what the name was. It eventually turned out that it was placed under her husband's name, so it wasn't my fault I couldn't find it at all. She didn't apologize or anything, so it felt really nice when I swiped her card and it was declined. She felt so embarrassed and just stormed off. Man. Whenever I hear Borders I get a twinge of nostalgia. I used to work at a bank branch. A client was being very disrespectful to a female staff member. Literally 2 minutes later our bank was robbed at the teller he was using. His $5,000 was taken right off the counter before it could be negotiated. Eventually it was covered by the bank, but at the time I can imagine him being worried. It's like life telling him, this is a warning, Joe, next time it'll be permanent. In Hawaii at the resort bar, kid that looks about 18, I'd have served him, orders a drink, barman asks for ID, hands over ID, sorry this is expired, kid loses his shit, insults the barman, threatens his livelihood, etc. Fast forward 2 days, sat in the bar at the airport, same douche comes in, orders a drink, lady behind the bar asks for ID, hands over ID, she looks at it and goes to hand it back, I pipe up, check the expiration date. Dick move, but karma is, as they say, a bitch. Worked at a liquor store. Customer came in extremely intoxicated, couldn't really speak, stumbling everywhere. We refused to sell to him and he flipped out. Ended up kicking him out with threat of calling the police. He went down the street to another store, and as he walked back past our store he yelled some very mean things at us and immediately tripped, shattering the bottle he bought on the sidewalk. Was a glorious sight. I love when I get to tell a rude customer that their coupon is expired/not valid. In the auto repair business, we must deal with a lot of passive aggressiveness from people displeased with having to shell out money for their cars. Once, a couple arrived to pick up a car which was parked in the first spot nearest the street. The husband was great, and had approved the needed repairs in stride. The wife was a raging bitch, debating every line item of the estimate, asking pointless questions, demanding a cheaper price, threatening to take the car elsewhere or just get a new one. Anyway, the man made his way toward the office, but the woman made a beeline for the car, found the keys stashed inside, threw the plastic seat cover to the wind, then started it up and drove off, before the bill had been paid, cutting the turn too sharp and scraping the entire passenger side of the car badly on the low concrete planter. I saw this happen, the husband didn't. Never saw them again. Not exactly retail, but food service. At a college football game, my co-worker was chewed out by an alumni because the hot chocolate wasn't chocolatey enough. All she and I could really do was sit there and apologize because there was nothing we could really do, until the bartender chimed in. This bartender is a former high school teacher, currently a substitute school teacher for all grades K-12, and the look she shot this man could have immediately shut up the cockiest of teenagers. Anyway, she put on her scolding face, and warned him, if you continue yelling at these girls over something they can't control, I'm going to have to ask you and all your friends to leave. I will not tolerate anyone abusing my coworkers. The guy immediately clammed up and hurriedly walked away with his tail tucked between his legs. Alright, bank worker. I had a customer throwing a fit once. Said he sees a charge for $50 on his account and blames us for not keeping his account secure. Throws a fit that rages on for a half hour. Turns out he forgot he used $50 for a mail cam service. This was discovered when my customer service rep looked at his account and googled who the charge was from. Sold computers and such for Circuit City back in the day. Was fairly new and the only one on shift as someone called in sick. This is around the time the iPod Nano came out, so everyone wanted to see them. Had been working with a group of people selling to each of them for over an hour when some guy comes up to me and asks why I have been ignoring his wife. Apparently they went into the back corner of the store and stood there not talking to anyone. They wanted a high-end laptop but didn't want me to get the commission because I ignored them. We didn't make commission at the time, so I didn't care in the slightest. Got the laptop out for a mangair to ring up and their check got declined. I did a happy dance. I worked at Kohl's a while ago and came across a very rude lady who, no matter what we could do to help her, nothing made her happy. Finally, as she decided to leave, she got stopped by our loss prevention for shoving jersey in her purse. It wasn't even high-end stuff either, just really cheap shit that was on clearance. Used to work in a call center for power. Guy called in angry he'd been disconnected for non-payment and threatened to drive to our town and cut everyone up if we didn't send someone out to reconnect him. We said we would then send the police out. Probably a nasty shock for him. I used to work on Starbucks. I only did it to customers who were really, really rude, but every once in a while my finger would slip and hit the decaf button. And NBSP. Edited to add, one time I gave extra calories by way of extra syrup to a socialite type girl who was rude to me. I dispatched for 911. Had an absolute BEEH of a woman call. She refused to answer any questions, would hardly tell me where she lived, and it was a complete nonsense complaint. The officers get to her trailer and it turns out she had a warrant and got arrested. Best part was the warrant was for an unrestrained dog citation. I work at Starbucks. One day as I was working the drive-thru, we were having longer than normal wait times, as we were short-staffed. This one guy gets up to the window in a huff, and starts yelling at me / complaining about his wait. I apologize and tell him his total. He literally throws his credit card at me, and it bounces off the bottom of the window directly underneath his truck. We look at each other for a second, and then he sends his daughter out of his truck to look for it. I inform them it's right under their truck, so he moves his truck up a bit, gets out, picks it up and hands it to me softly without making eye contact, as he is squeezing himself between the tail end of his truck and the wall of the building, being pretty embarrassed as everyone behind him is watching. It was pretty satisfying. Obligatory didn't happen to me, but I was there. In the queue in the hardware store, and the lady serving had a sign on the till which said that she was deaf. Beefcake behind me in the queue is trying to get the cashier's attention, huffing and puffing and talking shit at her for being slow. The person she was serving had a cart full of items. All of a sudden, he really loses his temper and screams at the cashier, "What the fuck's wrong with you? Are you fucking deaf?" I have never, ever seen so many people turn round in unison and give one person the death stare. My mum, who I was with at the time, pipes up, pointing to the sign on the till, "What the fuck's wrong with you? Can you not fucking read?" The guy goes redder than I have ever seen anyone go and skulks out, avoiding eye contact with everyone, to which he received a generous round of applause from everyone at the tills, including the other cashiers. My son was working on a supermarket checkout one weekend. Greeted a customer only to be told to just get on with ringing her stuff up and to quit delaying her. She went straight to customer services to complain how rude her checkout operator was, etc. Only a regular customer interrupted her, saying she witnessed it all and that she was the one being a real bitch. I was selling a woman a Nintendo 3DS for her son. I had given the son the box while I was ringing everything up because he was so happy to get his new toy. When it came time to talk about the accidental damage protection plan, she gave me an unreasonably hard time, making it sound like I accused her child of not being able to take care of his toys. The second she said that the kid threw the box across the store into some shelves and knocked down a bunch of games. She bought the 4-year plan. The best thing without a doubt is when another customer steps in as your defense and completely shuts down the shitty customer. Can beat that. Just a few weeks ago we had this roofer come in to patch up some holes on the roof. He was a dick to all of us, told us he had the right to go in and out the emergency exit, made sexual advances at women in the store, just was really scummy. Then he fell off the roof. A customer was ripping all my packaged prawns out of my fridges as they were partially frozen, and she was upset that they weren't fresh. So took pictures and was yelling and telling people around her that our supermarket was deceiving people. I then had to explain to her that they are caught in Thailand and therefore have to be frozen while they travel over here, UK. And that they would be green and gone off if they weren't frozen as soon as caught. Well, her face was a picture, as due to her causing a commotion there was a crowd of people around us and saw her get owned on simple common sense. I was working in a pub the day the Thailand tsunami hit, and we had a bucket behind the till to raise some money towards the relief. Massive duckhead regular tries to impress his friends by tipping me a drink, to which I thank him. but suggest he instead puts the tip in the bucket to help with the unfolding tragedy. He loses it, calls me all sorts of names, and why the fuck should we help people in other countries anyway? 30 minutes later his phone rang and he discovered a close friend had been in the area of one of the beaches, and the outlook became more grim as the day went on. Suddenly he seemed quite keen to add tips with each round. I felt a bit sorry for him, but he was a massive cunt. Used to work at GameStop and had a guest wanting to trade a copy of some older version of Call of Duty. He really didn't like the value and demanded to know how it could be so low. While this takes place in a GameStop, it was actually during a killer trade promotion, so the value actually was decent all things considered. I explained that it was an older version and it's not selling much anymore. He insists there is heavy demand still and turns around asking who wants to buy it. Everyone within earshot laughed him down and he left embarrassed. I was a waitress and asked a table if they wanted anything to drink, iced tea, Pepsi, water perhaps. They said no drinks. Later I take their meal order and wrap it up with "so should I bring over 2 waters?" They again said no, they didn't want anything. Kind of rude about it too, considering I just wanted to bring them water. Live in drought state where technically not supposed to bring it without asking, mind you. Anyways, bitch chokes on bread for a few coughs and her daughter has to assist her and rush to me to get some water, then has the nerve to say I shouldn't ever serve tables without a drink. TLDR, refused water from me twice, chokes on bread moments later. A doctor of mine, I recruit doctors doctor, was determined that I was hiding his expenses form which I'd sent on to the department administrators quite literally months before. He called me to tell me I was incompetent and he wanted to speak to my manager. Unfortunately for him I have a dump file filled with every email I send and receive. I happily put him on with my manager who explained that, no, I am not incompetent or hiding his form, and that he was copied into the emails about who would deal with it. Not only did she get an apology out of him, he actually wrote me an email apologizing afterwards too. It was so good I wish I could have had it on toast. Working as the attendant at a self-checkout. A customer became irate when I told him that we could not accept a coupon that had expired over 6 months previously and called me a vapid cunt. Neither he nor I knew up until that moment that my tall, muscular, highly protective older brother was standing in earshot. He grabbed the customer by the shoulder, spun him around, leaned down to get at his eye level and growled, "What did you just say to my little sister?" Right in his face. Dude practically pissed himself and ran out of the store. Edit, vapid and valid are not the same word. Thanks, phone. In automotive parts store. Had to inform a customer that he could not return the spark plugs he purchased due to him not having a receipt and the plugs being used for years and it was brand we didn't even sell. He was irate with a string of swear words that would make a longshoreman blush. Upon storming out of the store, he threw the loose spark plugs across the parking lot, striking another customer's windshield and shattering it. Other customer saw and was none too pleased. I laughed so hard. I worked at a Robex in high school. Robex is smoothies/frozen yogurt, similar to Jamba Juice. Some lady was being a complete asshole from the second she walked in, and was not only rude to me but the entire staff, for no reason. When we made her smoothie she took it and walked outside, and I saw through the window she tripped a bit and dropped her smoothie and it spilled everywhere on the sidewalk. She came back in demanding a free smoothie but I made her pay for another anyway, ha 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 ha. Last week we had this super rude guy run up to the service counter, cut in line and demand to be checked out immediately with his watermelon. He could not wait because he just stole a car. He was arrested in the parking lot on the way out of the store, for stealing a car. After purchasing a phone from me and being extremely rude and awful the whole time, they walked out of my store and instantly dropped their phone. It shattered and they were devastated. They had the nerve to ask me to do them a favor and add the warranty they earlier said no to cause it's a waste of money, and I had the pleasure of telling them it wasn't possible. I got yelled and screamed at, they threw their phone at me and security was called. Never saw them again after that, Thank God. At Sprint, woman causing a scene and yelling about her phone, old yellow Nextel brick, having liquid damage. She gets pissed off, throws her phone at me, misses completely and hits her hellspawn toddler in the head. Liked what you saw? Hit like, subscribe and the bell icon for more crazy Reddit content.